This was an old road deep in the forest outside of Norway. It was barely visible on maps. Once it had connected villages, but over the years it became abandoned. Rumors said a terrible accident had happened at the end of this road. It was believed that the spirits of those who died still roamed there. Locals avoided it, warning that strange things happened to those who dared to drive through at night. This story happened in 2017. Eric, who was 23 at the time, loved to go on weekend trips with his best friend Jonas. They both had a passion for adventure, especially exploring abandoned places. Inspired by ghost hunting videos on YouTube, they started their own small investigations. That night, Eric and Jonas decided to visit the so-called haunted road. They had only a flashlight and a camera, hoping to document their experience. Late at night, they drove into the road. It was dark and unsettling. Thick trees lined both sides, their twisted branches reaching overhead like skeletal fingers. The deeper they drove, the heavier the air became, pressing against them like an invisible weight. Jonas was driving. "Eric, I'm serious. This place feels really wrong," Jonas said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Eric laughed, though he felt uneasy too. The silence was unnatural. Not a single bird, not a rustling leaf, just dead, suffocating quiet. They stopped further down and stepped out. The crunch of gravel beneath their feet was the only sound as they turned on their flashlights. Mist thickened, swirling around their ankles. As they neared the end of the road, the silence became even heavier. It was as if nature was holding its breath. After a while, Jonas suddenly froze. "Eric, look, there's something ahead," he whispered. Eric squinted. About 10 meters away, a human silhouette stood in the middle of the road, motionless. "Is he waiting for someone? Maybe he's drunk," Eric murmured. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the case. The figure didn't move. It didn't even sway like a normal person standing in the cold night air. It was unnaturally still. Jonas grabbed Eric's arm. "Let's get in the car and leave," Jonas said, his voice shaking. But just as they turned around, the figure disappeared. They stood still, staring at each other. Then the scariest part happened. Their car engine shut off by itself. Jonas's breath hitched. "Eric, start the car! Start it now!" Eric jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key, but the engine wouldn't start. The headlights flickered, and for a brief second, something moved in the rearview mirror. Then came the sound. Breathing, slow, heavy, right behind them. Jonas turned toward the back window and froze. A figure with white, glowing eyes was staring at them. Jonas screamed and threw open the door. Eric followed, running blindly. The road seemed endless, stretching on, as if they were trapped in a loop. Just when they were losing hope, headlights appeared in the distance. A truck was approaching. The moment its lights hit them, everything shifted. The road was back to normal. The trees no longer looked twisted. The oppressive silence lifted. They looked back. There was nothing there. Shaking, they ran to their car. Eric hesitated before turning the key, afraid it still wouldn't work. But this time, the engine roared to life immediately. They never spoke on the drive home. Days later, they began researching the area. What they found sent chills down their spines. A fatal accident had happened there in 2010. A man had been trapped in his car, waiting for help. He had honked repeatedly for hours, but no one had come. When they found him the next morning, his hands were bruised from pounding on the glass, his eyes wide in a frozen scream. And the creepiest part? When they found his photo online, Jonas froze. "Eric, that's him." The white-eyed figure from that night was a perfect match. They never went back, but sometimes in their dreams, they saw him, watching. And the strangest part? The handprint from that night was still on their back window. It never faded, like a warning that whatever had happened that night wasn't over.